Many here in the West are still quite upset at the anti-energy bills, C-69 and C-48. In fact, 6 premiers, including UCP leader Jason Kenney, wrote a letter to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau saying the bills in their original form threaten national unity. To talk more about this is our political reporter, Brian Lilley, who joins me now from Toronto. Brian, Trudeau went on record saying anyone that plays with national unity is not fit for higher office. Was there not a time when he said he would back Quebec separating when Stephen Harper was Prime Minister?
Absolutely, and it's not that long ago, Hal, but just to back this up a little bit, we're talking about the premiers of 5 provinces plus a territory. They represent 59% of the population, 63% of Canada's GDP. We're talking the premiers of Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, New Brunswick, and the Northwest Territories, all of them writing to say, hey, look, C-48 and C-69, unless you accept the Senate amendments, are bad bills. They will hurt our economies. We need you to consider the Senate amendments. And of course, the Senate amendments were passed by the independent senators that Justin Trudeau appointed, but he doesn't want to take all of their amendments. And by the way, the independent senators that Justin Trudeau appointed, I just want to remind people, vote more in line with Trudeau Liberals than Liberal senators do, like 95% of the time. So he should be listening. He should be willing to say we're going to change it, but he's not. And instead he lashes out and says, if you're going to play national unity games, because the premiers rightly pointed out, if you start blocking natural resources out of Western Canada, it will hurt national unity. He says you're playing national unity games. Well, back in 2012, not that long ago, yes, it's 7 years ago, but by this point, Justin Trudeau was already an MP for almost 4 years now. He was just about to become Liberal Party leader. He became Liberal Party leader a year later. And he was saying that if Stephen Harper was still Prime Minister and things were changing in the wrong direction, becoming too conservative in Canada for him, he would think about voting yes for Quebec to separate. Wait a minute, hasn't he just disqualified himself from higher office? I've been calling him Captain Stumbles over the past couple of days over several gaffes that he's made. And this one, he is denouncing himself while denouncing the premiers. And by the way, I want to point out, the premiers said this will hurt national unity. None of them, to my knowledge, and I honestly don't know the premier of the Northwest Territories, but I can tell you that I have never heard Jason Kenney, Scott Moe, Brian Pallister, Doug Ford, or Blaine Higgs out in New Brunswick say, I'm going to vote for separating if I don't get my way. They've never said that. Only one person in this conversation I can tell you has, and his name is Justin Trudeau.
Our Prime Minister announced recently that he accepted the term genocide from the Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women and Girls Report. Brian, that comment may have landed our PM in hot water, and many disagree, calling it a genocide.
Yeah, Andrew Scheer, the Conservative leader, disagrees. The several prominent former Liberal cabinet ministers, Irwin Cotler, former Attorney General, Ujjal Dosanjh, former British Columbia Premier, former Federal Health Minister under Paul Martin, he disagrees with it being called a genocide. The Toronto Star, I want to point out that the Toronto Star, a very Liberal-friendly paper, said, look, we can all agree that lots of bad things happen, but the word genocide does not apply here. Maybe we need a different word for what happened, but genocide isn't it. Justin Trudeau, though, has decided that he would plead guilty for all of Canada, and that has prompted the Organization of the American States, an organization that encompasses basically the 34 nation states of North and South America, to say, oh, you've just admitted to genocide? We need to do our own investigation. So now we've got an international investigation into whether Canada is guilty of genocide.
Wow. Trudeau had an interesting stumble during a recent interview discussing his ban on single-use plastics. Brian, he had a tough time answering a reporter's question when asked about ways he and his family reduce their plastics use. Let's have a look.
And what do you and your family do to cut back on plastics?
We have recently switched to drinking water bottles out of when we have water bottles out of a plastic, away from plastic towards paper like drink box water bottles sort of things.
Brian, it looked like our Prime Minister was grasping for straws.
Grasping for straws or paper like drink box water bottles sort of things. They're called Tetra Paks, Justin. They've been around a long time. And now, so we all know Tetra Paks, the little juice boxes you give to your kids. Wine can come in them, for the adult beverages. They're not overly recyclable, but some companies have started marketing water in them. And they claim that, well, it's mostly paper. It's 74% paper, so it's good. Yeah, but it's also 74% paper, 6% aluminum, and what does that leave us? 20% plastic. To be able to break these down, the water companies, by the way, don't call them Tetra Paks because that has a bad connotation because they're incredibly hard to recycle, but they are effectively Tetra Paks. To be able to peel apart the cardboard from the plastic, from the aluminum, and break them up into different components that can be recycled takes an incredible amount of energy. This makes it very impractical and economically infeasible in many cases to recycle these things. There's a lot of municipalities that will not take them and say, no, that goes in the garbage. We are not even going to try and recycle them. I can tell you that the LCBO, Ontario's liquor store, the largest purchaser of beverage alcohol in the world, pushed back against several major winemakers when they wanted to start moving from glass bottle to Tetra Paks because they said, no, we've got a good thing going here with being able to recycle glass. We can't deal with this. It's not feasible. But the companies marketing this water have made it seem trendy. They've made it seem cool. And people like Justin Trudeau have bought into it. Maybe it's better than the glass bottles that he used to have trucked into his family's home at Rideau Cottage. He doesn't live at 24 Sussex. He lives across the street. When he became Prime Minister, I've got a copy of an access to information request where the National Capital Commission said we must supply the Prime Minister's family with water in glass bottles. Apparently he hasn't heard of a couple of simple things that I use. They're called the tap. And if you don't like tap water, there's this other thing called a Brita. And, it filters the water and you put it in your fridge and you refill it when it's empty. But the Prime Minister apparently doesn't like those.
Or, when we were kids riding our bikes, we'd go home and just turn on the hose, right? Just drink from the hose.
I may have done that.
Yeah, that's right. We may have. Now, recent polls are showing the Green Party is gaining some momentum at the expense of the Liberals and the NDP.
And that's why I think this plastics ban proposal has come in. There's no legislation behind this. They want to use the Canadian Environmental Protection Act to bring in this single-use plastics ban. But they didn't really bring in any legislation. They didn't bring in any amendments to the legislation. There's no details. So I think they're looking and saying, okay, we're down in the polls. We are only a few months away from the election. And the Green Party is coming up. Now, this is a poll that I wrote about from a company called Campaign Research. And their top line numbers are 35% of voters say they would back the Conservatives. 32% would back the Liberals. Now, smart viewers will say, oh, that sounds like within the margin of error. Absolutely. Well, what's happening for the other two parties? Well, the NDP has dropped down to 14% support in this poll by Campaign Research, but the Greens have come up to 12. And then more concerning for the Liberals is that while the Conservative vote is solid and the overwhelming majority of people that say they're leaning to the Conservative say they will not even consider another party, among the three progressive parties, the Bloc, not the Bloc, they're only in Quebec, but the Greens, the NDP, and the Liberals, they're all saying, yeah, I'll consider somebody else. About half of Liberal voters say they would consider somebody else. The same for the Greens and the NDP. So Justin Trudeau knows if he wants a shot, he's got to do something to get those Green voters back into his tent. And that's why I think this plastics ban, look, we all need to use less plastics. I'm always outraged by overpackaging. We can always do a better job. But what he's proposing and calling it science-based, it's more about politics and optics than it is about science and the environment.
In the last election, the Liberals made promises on the issue of gun control. Brian, they're now making more noise about potentially banning one of the most popular rifles in Canada.
Yeah, this is a rifle that has a bad rap. Yes, it has been used in an awful lot of mass shootings in the United States, but in Canada, it's been around for 50 odd years or so, there are, depending on which RCMP, both of these numbers come from the RCMP, between 66 and 86,000. That number is a year or two old. Over the last several weeks, as there's been talk about banning the AR-15, literally thousands more have been sold as people say, I want to make sure that I can buy this gun while it's still legal. Cabela's across the country have actually been sold out. They're one of the major retailers. Other retailers have been sold out. And why are the Liberals going to try and ban the AR-15? Again, because it has a bad rap. But consider this, Hal. You take the high number or the low number, 66,000 or 86,000. I keep asking people, show me the crime spree in Canada created by the AR-15 rifle. You can't find one. There was one mob hit that went the wrong way that the AR-15 was used in. That's one. You've still got between 66 and 86,000 law-abiding gun owners. The mobsters aren't buying their guns at your local Canadian Tire. They're not going to your local gun shop. They're buying them on the black market. And they will continue to do that even if you ban them. Why? Why do we know that? Because we always find them with other banned guns when they're arrested. So the Liberals want to make this into a wedge issue. They're convinced that they can get suburban mothers to say, I'm scared about guns. This one is, it's black. It looks scary. It's not like Grandpa's hunting gun. It's not even as strong as Grandpa's hunting gun, but it's black polymer. It's not a wood gun. So people say it looks scary. They want to ban it, and they're going to do it on emotion and then try and make that into a wedge issue against the Conservatives for the election campaign.
On the international stage, agriculture producers are still having to deal with the Chinese ban on canola, peas, and soy. Our pork and beef producers are also not happy with China right now. What's the latest?
The latest is that they continue to face more inspections, and the government hasn't solved this. We talked about this last week, that all of a sudden beef producers were added on top of canola, on top of soy, on top of peas, on top of pork. And now we've got beef. Brian Mulroney, former progressive conservative prime minister, he was in Toronto about a week ago. He was receiving an award from the Canadian Club. And while he's there, he made a comment that maybe Justin Trudeau should be sending Jean Chrétien to China. Mulroney doesn't have great relations with China. I'm not saying he has bad ones, but Jean Chrétien, after he left office, did an awful lot of business as a consultant, as a lawyer, with companies trying to set up shop in China. And he had a decent relationship with the people in Beijing when he was prime minister. So Mulroney said, Justin Trudeau should send Chrétien as a special envoy. Chrétien then jumped up and said, yeah, I'd be game for that. I'd be willing to go. As far as we know at this point, publicly, they have not announced that Justin Trudeau has asked Jean Chrétien to do it. He could have done it this past Monday night. It was John Turner, former Prime Minister John Turner's 90th birthday. Chrétien was there. Mulroney was there. Turner was there. Trudeau was there. He could have just walked across to 2 tables over and said, hey, Jean, can you help a guy out? Can you help your country out? Chrétien said he's willing to do it. He just needs the government to actually say, we want you to do it. So far, they haven't.
Wow. The Toronto Raptors lead the NBA Finals 3-2, Brian. They're so close to bringing the city its first championship since the 1993 Blue Jays. Now, you're in Toronto. What is the Raptors' run doing to the city? And do you think Leonard, Lowry, and co. can close it out?
I believe they can close it out. I believe they can do it Thursday night in Oakland. I want to see them make those fans leave the Oracle Center early like they did in the last 2 games down in Oakland, and make that the last game ever played at the Oracle Center, because the Golden State Warriors are leaving. They're going to San Francisco. So I think they can. Let me tell you, Hal, it has been electrifying this city. I'm old enough to remember the Blue Jays' 93 win. It was amazing. It was electrifying. This is just like that. No Canadian team has won a major sporting event. I don't count Toronto FC winning the Major League Soccer trophy. I don't count that. But, we're talking baseball, hockey, and basketball. Our football leagues are separate. We haven't won since 93. The Habs won the Stanley Cup in the spring of 93. In the fall of 93, the Blue Jays won the World Series. Since that, not a single Canadian team across the country has won one of these intercontinental trophies. and the Raptors have a chance to do it. They didn't do it. They came so close on Monday night. It was heartbreaking. I was ready to head out into the streets and start partying, and I ended up having to sit there crying in my beer.
A lot of actually Golden State fans were crying when they saw Kevin Durant go down with his Achilles injury. And some people were blasting Toronto fans saying, you guys were cheering when our all-star went down. But that's not necessarily the case of what happened, right?
So initially, yeah, there were some cheers. And then as soon as people figured out that Durant was actually injured, they stopped. Part of it, from the Raptors themselves, Kyle Lowry, Serge Ibaka, tamping things down and saying, hey, and they're waving their hands down saying, stop this. And people stopped and they applauded him as he got up to get off the court. I talked to, I've got some friends that were in the game and they said, it's a little overblown. Maybe what you saw on TV was different, but he said, a couple of people I talked to said, yeah, of course, your opponent's best player goes down. Your initial reaction is, yeah, oh, hey, we got an extra shot. But as soon as people figured out that he was injured, they're not going to cheer an injury. This isn't Hamilton playing football. As I can attest, and as you can attest going to Ticat games, you could tell us that we were being classless at the old Ivor Wynn Stadium. We'd still cheer on somebody getting an injury. That was not the case at the Raptors game on Monday night.
Fingers crossed, go Raptors go. They can bring Canada another championship. One of our regular contributors, Brian Lilley, joining me from Toronto. Thanks again, Brian.
Thank you, Hal.